And here now with more on the latest political updates, we have Executive Director of Honestreporting, Daniel Pomerantz. Thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure.
So what's going on with Otzma being left out of this new unity party on the right? Doesn't it make more sense, especially from Smotrich's view from the URP, to include Otzma?
Well, of course, it all comes down to one basic fact, which is that if you don't have at least 3.25% of the total vote, you don't get into the Knesset at all. So that's why a lot of parties are trying to merge to make sure none of them get left out completely, even if they get some votes.
And that those votes are not spread between the other parties and possibly the opposition.
Exactly. So the Kahanist party, which is what we're talking about here, is associated with the memory of the late Mayor Kahana, and he is a tremendously unpopular figure in Israel. He has a niche of support, but he could actually be a political liability. Now, of course, as you were talking about, that Peretz and some of these other actors also are a little bit dramatic in their rhetoric and could also cost votes, but not nearly to the degree that Kahana can.
So is this the end of small parties in such a way? Because we're also seeing a lot of mergers on the left, like the Labor Gesher and Meretz merger, and the Arab parties, of course, after the failure of being split in the first elections in April. So are we seeing kind of the build-up, the beginning of the age of big parties?
Well, it could be. A number of years ago, Yesh Atid, which later became the Blue and White Party, brought a law to raise the minimum threshold to enter the Knesset for precisely this reason. They felt there were too many small special interest parties. So the idea of that law was to move us toward a system where there would be fewer parties that would also be larger parties. But of course, that means that sometimes parties with very disparate interests end up having to combine.
So is that better or worse in the long run for Israel's election system? Because we're ending up with these big parties with, as you said, a lot of different views, sometimes in opposition of one another. Does that maybe hamper the ability of government to function?
Well, it could hamper the ability of government to function if there's too many disparate views, but the hope is that in the long term, it will create pressure for parties to be a little bit more mainstream, to not have quite as many extreme niche views, so that you'll have to please a larger percentage of the electorate, which hopefully could lead to a more moderate Israel.
All right, so I guess my final question real quick. Do you think Otzma has any chance of getting in, even on its own?
The latest polls that I've seen show that they don't have a chance of getting in on their own, but in Israeli politics, things can change in an instant.
All right, Daniel Pomerantz, thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure.